based in Rockhampton. Today I want to talk to you about excavator access and egress systems and the hazards associated with them. Let me give you some background. The 14 months starting on the 15th of November 2018 was one of the worst periods in the recent history of Queensland mining. We've had 8 fatalities, 6 in coal mines and 2 in metalliferous mines and quarries. Inspectors were very busy investigating these fatalities. In one of the incidents, an operator was fatally injured by the hydraulic access ladder of a Komatsu PC 4000-11 excavator. I was part of the team that investigated this incident. Separate to the incident, we also reviewed excavator emergency access and egress systems. So this presentation comes in 2 parts. Part 1 is about the hazards from routine access to large excavators. We're going to talk about the fatality, our findings, and recommendations we have for you. In the second part of the presentation, we talk about emergency access and egress system hazards. We're going to talk about tests we've done, our findings, and recommendations as well. So let's start with part 1. So most large excavators, the ones that's typically used on large mines like coal mines, have hydraulic retractable access ladders. You can see one there on the photo. Before operations, the ladder is lifted with a hydraulic cylinder, and it's stored out of the way during operations. In the fatality we investigated, an operator got entangled between this retractable access ladder and the machine wall. So just above the pivot point that you see there in the photo. This slide is a photo taken from on board, looking down on the access ladder. You'll see a blue line that's called handrail cell A2. The operator's body was found protruding through this cell. There is more than one potential scenario for how he could have entered that cell. But once entering, the emergency release valve was activated and the ladder was lowered. You can see the red arrow pointing the position of this emergency release valve. We believe that the operator's injuries were caused by the scissor action as the handrails from the rotating part past the handrails that were fixed on the excavator. Here is another photo of the same access ladder, but looking from the bottom up. You can see the handrails that are fixed to the side of the machine wall. And then here at the bottom, you can see the blue line, which indicates the same cell A2 that we talked about before. The operator was found with his lower body and his legs on the stairs, and with his upper body protruding through cell A2. He was facing the machine wall. Let's have a careful look at the handrails. The 3 photos you see there, one set are marked with the blue and green lines, and the other one is unmarked. You'll see a photo number A, B, and C. Photo A is taken with the ladder in the vertical position. B is in the position where it's halfway down, And position C is where the ladder is totally down to the bottom. As the ladder rotates down, you'll see the blue lines pass in front of the green lines. So in other words, each time a blue line crosses a green line, there is a scissor action. We believe it's these actions, the scissor actions, that cause the operator's injuries. So let's look at a few recommendations that we generated from the investigation. The hazards from hydraulic access ladders need to be considered during all phases, during design, when equipment is ordered, but also when they're introduced to site. Persons using ladders and stairs must use 3-point contact. You also need to make sure that all users of these ladders are aware of the hazards. This is what was done to the machine involved in the incident afterwards. These yellow covers were made to put over the emergency release valve that prevent direct access to them. You'll see the mesh inserts within the handrails. They are there to prevent body parts from reaching through, which will then take them away from the scissor action between handrails moving past each other. We also have other recommendations and details which can be seen on our Safety Bulletin 185 that can be found on the RSHQ website. Okay, this brings us to part 2 of this presentation. That is hazards from emergency access and egress. So the Mines Inspectorate, in conjunction with mine operators, tested large excavators, emergency access and egress systems. We tested a variety of brands, and they included Caterpillar, Hitachi, Komatsu, and Liebherr. We found issues that could potentially hinder or prevent either emergency access or emergency egress. We're going to talk about some of the issues in this presentation, but there are further details in Safety Bulletin 194 and its appendix. From the excavators that we tested, a large percentage were affected. I estimate in the order of 70%. We would not necessarily have discovered all potential issues. Mine operators may discover a few more if they do the tests that we'll describe shortly. Just please note that we haven't tested emergency escape socks. That's probably something that you can do when you get a chance. Okay, let's look at the two primary hazards in these emergency systems. So the first one is an access hazard. So let's say you've got an operator on board that requires assistance. He may have had a heart attack and rescuers are needed to come and help him. We found that the rescuers may not be able to get on board due to the way the access worked. This hazard is more or less the opposite of the previous one. In this scenario, the operator is on board. He can't get to the main access ladder due to some reason, like a fire in the machine room, and he needs to get back on the ground by another way. We found that there could be some obstacles on his way down. So to test these ladders, we had two test scenarios. The first one, a person goes on board, lifts the access ladder, and after that, do not participate in the test anymore, representing an incapacitated operator. Second person on ground level, which represents a rescue person, needs to get on board without assistance from the person on board and without the help of additional equipment. Test the emergency egress function. We also had an operator on board. The ladder was lifted, but he could not get to the ladder. Effectively, it's not functioning because of some reason, like a fire in the engine room. So for this test, the operator had to get off the excavator and without assistance from anybody else. We did the tests both in engine on and engine off configurations, and with the house at different rotational positions relative to the track frame. So let's look at a few issues that could hinder emergency egress. In this case, some excavators have a ladder system in the front for emergency egress. The ladder is in two halves, one on the house and the other half on the truck frame. So in a case where the house is rotated relative to the truck frame, these ladders would obviously not align and the person would not have access to ground level. The possible solution to this situation, you can see on the far right-hand photo, some excavators had a roll-up ladder attached to the house. So it doesn't matter where the house rotation is, they could still come down. Those that did not have this roll-down ladder would not provide access or egress for an operator that wants to come down. This part of the test is about the side emergency egress ladder. Normally, this half is stored up next to the upper half of a ladder. When needed, this half is deployed. It slide down to the correct position to make one long ladder. It's stopped at the right spot with two brackets. I call them stopper brackets in this slide. We found during the test that both the stopper brackets broke off. That allowed the ladder to move further than a safe position, and the ladder could not be used. To deploy that same side ladder that I showed you in the previous slide, a pin needs to be pulled from on board. We found that these pins were very hard, in some tests, were very hard to pull out because the holes were misaligned. You can see there are two holes on brackets on the ladder itself, and then another hole in the structure on board. So these holes are not aligned. The pin is hard to pull out. For one of these tests, it took about 3 minutes to get that pin out. In case of a fire on board, 3 minutes is a very long time. All right, let's look at a few issues that were found that were hindering emergency access from ground level. In this case, the pull wire, this pull wire needs to be activated to let the ladder down. Could not be reached. It was simply too high. In the photo, you see that this person reached out for a broom, and with the broom, he could actually reach it. Now, obviously, you're not always going to have a broom handy when you need to do that task. So normally, you would simply not be able to reach that pull wire. Some machines have a rod that is stored within the truck frame. This rod can be used to reach up towards the pull line. So what we saw in this case is that the bracket holding the rod was missing, and that in turn allowed the rod to go missing. So at the time, this rod was not there. So once more, the pull line would not have been able to get pulled. For this design, the access ladder is lowered with controls that are within the service tail. We didn't see any signage to indicate where these controls are or what needs to be done. So a person unfamiliar with the excavator that would attempt to rescue somebody on board would simply not be able to get there. So let's look at a few recommendations. Okay, we recommend that functionality tests be done on all large excavator emergency ladders, as per the test that we showed before, something similar. We also recommend that these tests be scheduled in the maintenance management system at some frequency determined by a risk assessment. This is to accommodate for a situation where the ladders get damaged in operation and they may not be working as well as initially when installed the previous time they were tested. The original equipment manufacturers should be involved in the rectification of design flaws and disperse their learnings throughout the industry. It might be prudent to check other large units of mining equipment too, such as drag lines and large dump trucks. They all have retractable access ladder systems. Two safety bulletins, 185 and 1894, has more details. Safety bulletin 194 also has an appendix with model-specific details. Just a summary of what we found in the tests. Once you've read the safety bulletins, there might be some parts of it that you would like to include in your daily inspections. Okay, a summary of our presentation. We did it in two parts. The first part was about hazards from the main hydraulic access ladder on excavators. We looked at the fatality investigation we've done, the findings. We made some recommendations, and we refer you to Safety Bulletin 185, where there will be more details. The second part of this presentation, we looked at the hazards from emergency access and egress ladders. We looked at testing, our findings, gave you a few recommendations, and in this case, we referred you to Safety Bulletin 194 for more details. If you would like to contact me for any reason related to this presentation, my contact details are on the screen. There's a phone number and an email address as well. I thank you for your attention. I trust that you would have learned a few things today that you may apply at your mine to make it a safer workplace for people involved with excavators. I thank you for your attention.